to be back here again in this wonderful community, and thank you for the invitation to have me speak, to see some old friends here and new ones. Thank you, Arthur and Paul, and others who over the years invite me, and we keep the conversation going. Let's see, I've been all over the world and teaching about leadership development, which is the main focus of my institute. But I think about 20 years ago, I was teaching a leadership program at this Fortune 500 company, and I recognized that most of the teachings of leadership had to do with conserving the status quo, keeping the system as it exists today going, to be more productive, more efficient, more effective, produce bigger results. And I was really good at teaching people how to do that. So I made some good money. And I got to travel all over the world, work with the World Bank and other institutions, not just corporations. I also work with the UN, USAID in Israel. So it was a good job. I did a good job. But I also recognized about 20 years ago that the leadership that we had was part of the problem, because the leadership was contributing to the world being unsustainable. That was my insight. So I started looking at, what was going on in the world in a bigger picture, in a global sense. And I realized, well, we need a different type of leadership. If we want to have a different type of world, a more just, sustainable, and flourishing world, then we need a different kind of leadership to take us towards that future. So that's when I started researching and creating this methodology of evolutionary leadership about 20 years ago. And then say, okay, I'm going to offer this new type of leadership to the world. And so I created an institute. I have about 50 members in this community worldwide. You are all welcome to join, by the way. I don't know, Arthur, you haven't joined my community yet. You should. I'll give you a discount. All of you are welcome. And it's almost free, really. But we have members all over the world, in Latin America, and we have a lot of members in Europe, some in Africa, etc. But the main thing is we want to have people develop a commitment to building a better future. And I think that's where humanism comes in, because humanism has great amount of good people, good thinkers, good visionaries. However, my only criticism is we need more leadership. So there's no shortage of thinkers in the humanist movement. And today we're going to talk about one of them. In fact, two of them. I'm going to draw inspiration from one of them, Steven Pinker, whose picture is in the back wall. He's the second picture up in the wall. There's Daniel Dennett, there's Steven Pinker, and a whole bunch of other great thinkers, right, back there. And they all write wonderful stuff. And I've read some of their books. Also, someone who is not back there, but maybe should, is Julian Huxley. So, I think most of the people back there are Americans. Maybe, I may be wrong. But we do need some Africans like Wangari Maathai from Kenya. She's, to me, evolutionary thinker. Wonderful. She's the woman who planted millions of trees and got the Nobel Peace Prize. So we need people like Wangari Maathai and other people like Julian Huxley, who is no longer with us, but he's terrific. And so I'm going to include some of his thinking in the presentation today. So anyway, well, about 20 years ago, when I started developing this new concept of evolutionary leadership and all its implications, including evolutionary progress, which is the topic today, conscious evolution, things like that. I was definitely influenced by the evolutionary thinking of, like I said, some people like Julian Huxley, who wrote a book called Evolutionary Humanism. Anyone ever read that book? Julian Huxley's, you have, Art? It's amazing. He wrote it in the, I think in the 50s, and it's still relevant today, even more than ever, I would say. What he proposes in that book. But there were other people that I ran into, people like Jonas Salk, who maybe should have his picture up there too. Mr. Jonas Salk, who is the inventor of the Salk polio vaccine, and he has an amazing institute down in La Jolla called the Salk Institute for Biological Research. So I had a chance to bump into him and went to one of his lectures, and I was amazing what he was talking about. He's a humanist and believes in reason and science, and he shared with me a paper which had a big influence in me. And his paper was, how do we solve the world's problems? Not bad, right? 20 pages. Yeah, how do we solve the world's problems in 20 pages, right? And he said, look, we scientists, we know how to solve a lot of biological problems. And he did, like polio. And we have made progress in many places, but the biggest challenge now is how to evolve the mind. Because the mind of the human that's complicated, and it's good and it's bad. You know, it's like human nature. It's got those two sides. And you know, so he said the next challenge for us scientists is how to evolve the mind and evolve our cultures. The metabiological future, did it pause there? So, yeah. So he said this would be one of the biggest challenges. Now for me it was wonderful because I'm trained as a psychologist. I've been studying the mind now for like 50 years. Since I was in college in New York City, the first thing I do, you got to read Freud and things like that. So I've been studying. So when I read that paper, I said, there's hope for humanity. We can evolve the mind so that we don't kill ourselves and destroy ourselves. Okay, so that's my brief introduction into my humanist background, so that you can see that I'm in good company, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. So let me see one thing that so what I want to do is, in a minute when we get this slide going, there you go. Perfect. And yeah, thank you. Just go with this, the one on the right, the little arrow. Are we moving forward? Backwards? This one? Okay, great. So,
excuse me, can you fix the buzz?
Yeah, it's kind of annoying. The speaker is buzzing the whole time.
Sorry, if you can't. I can't fix it now anyway.
If you want it, yeah, you need it in order for me to record. Otherwise, I would take it off if you want me to. Let me see, maybe lower it a little bit. Okay, so Steven Pinker, a philosopher, scientist, has written many books, which I highly recommend. In this one here, Enlightenment Now, which is his most recent book, which, as you can see, is 450 pages. He covers a great amount of ground. He says Enlightenment Now means how could we use
the pillars, the key ideas of the period of the Enlightenment, and how do we keep those 4 key ideas going forward? And how do we make humanity better with these 4 key ideals of the Enlightenment? And what are those 4 key ideals? Well, they are reason, science, humanism, and progress. And so in this book, he really makes a very strong case for how those 4 ideals can make us into better humans and also make a better world. So I want to present a little bit of those 4 ideals, but also I want to present Pinker's version, his version of progress, because that's one of the key ideals, that we humans can continue to make progress. And so I want to present his version of progress, which I think is very good, but I also want to critique it. So part of my point here today is to critique it in a positive way so that we humanists can continue the progress as a humanist. And because he's a human. As a human being, he's also got what we call in my work, his blind spots. Okay? Now, every one of us has our own blind spots, including me. So we need each other to be able to uncover those blind spots. So Pinker has his. And of course, he's very good at pointing other people's blind spots. So he's 400 pages where he criticizes a lot of people, believe me, which is what a lot of academics do. You know, they spend a lot of time saying, you know, I got the right answer, you know. I used to be an academic too for 7 years, so you get good at saying my theory is better than your theory, you know, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to critique it in a good way and also present my own view of evolutionary progress, okay? So that's the gist of today. Now this book, which I think is really great, is divided basically in 2 parts. The part where he shows how humanity has made progress in 12 to 14 different areas of the world. 12 to 14 areas. So he has very data-driven about that. But then the last 4 chapters, I think, are really key and really important for us in the humanist community because they address things like humanism, the progress that humanists can make in the world. And if I had to give this book to anyone, I would just copy the last 4 chapters and do that. Because one of the sad things about modern humans is that they are reading less and less. I went the other day, I met with a book publisher to publish my book on evolutionary leadership, and the first thing he said is, too many words. Too many words, too many pages. It's only 250. I mean, this is 450. He said, too many, keep it under 100. You know, it says Americans don't read anymore. It says they just don't read anymore. We're losing our reading capacity. I said, wow, that doesn't say good for humanity, you know. So whatever you're doing, don't lose your capacity for reading. So he turned down my book. It was 250 pages. He said, bring it down to 100. And he also said, it's too complicated. I mean, come on, it's too complicated. We just want to make humanity better. You know, justice, sustainability, flourishing. It's not too complex. You know, give me a break. Okay? So I turned down my book. So I got to find another publisher. Okay? Or self-publish. Okay. So let me move on to the next one here. So in Enlightenment Now, Steven Pinker makes a powerful case that the world in many dimensions has gotten better. Okay, and by better, he means healthier, richer, safer, freer, more literate, more knowledgeable, and smarter. Now, the literate part, maybe because he teaches at Harvard, and he has a choice of students, and they have to read, otherwise they don't get their grades. But a lot of people that I used to teach in Boston, believe me, Boston College, and after people finish with it, they go, oh, I never want to see a book again. You know? So we're in deep trouble. So more literate, I mean, we definitely have more books out there. So those are important things that he says, you know, richer, safer, freer. And he, in this case, Pinker presents himself as a very, you could say, positive force. We made progress, etc. Now, interesting enough, he published this book just when our president got elected, just in that year. So there's a few critiques of Trump in here, because there was progress, and all of a sudden he goes, whoops. What happened to progress? He even himself makes fun of himself. He goes, boy, we were doing so good in progress, and now it's like, what happened? So he's sort of ambivalent in the book about what are we going to do with Trump, you know.
Assassinated.
Yeah. So moving forward, Pinker's evidence for a better world. The world has gotten better for most people, as he said, in several areas. So in this book, he basically selects 12 to 14 areas, such as, okay? So he says, life expectancy. I think so. Look at this room. Life expectancy. Look at Arthur. He's going on 90. Young guy. 90 is still making trouble, you know? So look at me, right? Look at us. So life expectancy, that's good. Health, sustenance, wealth, inequality, the environment, peace, safety, terrorism, democracy, equal rights, knowledge, quality of life, and happiness. He has a whole chapter on happiness, you know. So, you know, if you read that, you go, that's pretty impressive. Now, he's got statistics, charts, and data. And in some cases, I think it's good. I mean, we are living longer. We have solved some big problems in some areas. We do have more democracies, and so you can challenge. I think it's worthwhile to also, somebody who's traveled around the world, right? When he says, for example, you know, people, you know, he has a chapter on Chile. You know, Chile's GDP, you know, gross GMP, one of those things, has gotten better. You know, there are more richer people in Chile. Sure, just like the U.S., but it's concentrated, right? So you can have the GDP go up, but it's owned by the same 10 families in Chile. So you still have a lot of poverty, but by GDP standards, you could say, well, you know, you know, the United States has more billionaires than ever before. Doesn't mean the average person is richer, just more money accumulated in certain areas. So some of his data could be challenged. And but anyway, so he goes after data, and he bases his claims on data and research with charts, etc., from around the world. Like I said, but you can, for myself included, you can begin to challenge some of that data. And I think it's important to do that. Pinker bases these trends on the 4 key ideals of delight. So he says, look, because of reason, we made progress. Because of more and more people are using reason to design the world, design our institutions, design our future, more with reason. You know, so that's one of his arguments. And we should continue with that. We made progress because of science, okay? So we have more technology. And he sees we're going to have even better science, neuroscience, nanotechnology, etc. We made progress because of humanism. Now, I think here he does a terrific job because he defines humanism in a very important way, in a very broad sense. Humanism hold on a second, let me turn this on. It was my phone that was being charged there. So the way he defines humanism is really, really good, and it's worthwhile for all of us members of the community just to even have some research, some work around that. So I would encourage you to, because you can really see the key ideals, ideals and ideas of thinkers who have made progress, and we're still making some progress. I mean, again, if you look at some of the people in the back of the room, some of the photographs, I mean, you have people there like Barney Frank. How many people know who Barney Frank is? You know. Some of you know, right? I used to live in Massachusetts, so I used to vote for him. You know, he's a good politician, and he was in favor of gay rights and many things. So he's a good person. So humanism has a lot to contribute, and the way he defines it here is really great. Progress, the last one, which is the key concept that I'm going to focus on a little bit. Progress, because he says we have made progress, but we cannot take it for granted. And I agree with him, because humanity makes progress, but we could also go backwards. Look at the Dark Ages after the Roman Empire, right? For 1,000 years, Europe was supposedly in the Dark Ages. Roads were no longer being built, etc. So those are the four. So Enlightenment Now, and Pinker does, like I said, an excellent job in explaining the power of reason, science, humanism, and the commitment to progress and its positive impact on the world. One can see that in the past, hundreds and thousands of years of humanity lived for the most part under the influence of superstition, irrational belief, tyranny, cruelty, slavery, and death by incurable diseases. And some people will call this the Dark Ages. I also call it the Empire era. Some of us who begin to look at the evolution of humanity and the history of humanity, we can see that not just the last 2,000 years we've been through a period of dark ages, but if we go even further back, 5,000, 10,000 years, we begin to see the roots of what some of us call the Empire era. And the Empire era is characterized by very strong patriarchal ideas, like man rules over woman, over nature, etc. So very strong patriarchal ideals, and we still live in that under the Empire era. Now, one of the things that we have to make in terms of designing a better future, an evolutionary progress, what I would call evolutionary progress, was to leave the Empire era behind us in patriarchy and domination and control of nature, like we've been doing for the last 10, 20,000 years. So the problem that we have today is not just with the current administration, by the way. We have a problem with our history of 10,000 years of Empire era behavior. But in spite of all of that, as Pinker would say, we made some progress. We are no longer doing slavery for the most part, right? So slavery, we made some progress there, so I think he's right. And we made progress in many, many other areas, especially those of us living in the Bay Area of California are proud to know that we have been on the forefront of many civil rights and other types of rights. So there's hope, there's progress. Moving on. Okay, so my critique of the claims and its major assumptions. Okay, so while I agree with the contributions to the four ideals of the Enlightenment, and that the world in many cases has gotten better, I think that some of these ideas and worldviews driving a modern world are also driving us toward an unsustainable future for people and planet. So, this progress, we made progress in the last 300, 400 years with the ideals of the Enlightenment. However, some of the progress is being, you could say, the force behind that is the worldview that the planet is one huge resource, one big warehouse, for example. And all we have to do is go out there and get it. You know, all the resources, extract as much as we can. Like right now, for example, in Brazil, where I was living for a while, we are cutting down the Amazon forest about 40 soccer fields, the equivalent of 40 soccer fields a minute. A minute. That's a lot of cutting down. Okay? And that's the rainforest. And that's, you know, so it doesn't, that's the kind of progress that I think we don't want, where we destroy our future and we destroy the Amazon. And I think Pinker is aware of that. However, I think because he, I would say he's such an optimist, you know, that I think he buys his own optimism. and he saves some of his criticism for what other people that disagree with him. So he spends a lot of time in the book arguing with the so-called leftist social critics, which is weird, but he argues with that. Well, the leftists are always saying that we're not making enough progress, we still have problems with people. So he thinks they're pessimists. His word for a lot of leftist critics are, and I think I'm a leftist critic myself, he says they're too pessimistic because they're always criticizing America, and America is not just 100% and not enough democracy and not enough this. And so he picks fights with other intellectual people in academia, but that's what academics do sometimes. So I don't want to do that with him. I want to give him credit, but at the same.
So I can't help you with that at the moment.
Okay, so here, so Pinker is aware, right? You know, he's aware of some of this negative trends. For example, he's heavy against Nietzsche. You know, the philosopher Nietzsche. You know, he said, I don't know why people bother with Nietzsche. Why people read Nietzsche? I mean, all the stuff that Nietzsche says is useless. You know, like be yourself. You know, enlightenment by yourself and make yourself into the Superman and all. He completely, puts down Nietzsche, to give you an example, okay? So Pinker's aware of some of these negative trends, but remains optimistic and hopeful. For example, when you talk to him about global warming, global warming, he said, we can solve that with reason, science, right? And progress and the right technology, we'll solve global warming. It's like, no big deal. What's the problem? We go into nuclear energy, we'll build more nuclear reactors, better nuclear reactors, we get out of oil, and if technology will solve all this stuff. I don't agree with him. So, just to give you an example, that technology is going to fix everything. So he remains optimistic, and in some cases very committed to these ideas. So what is wrong, in my opinion, with the progress that Pinker makes, or his claims? Well, for one thing, he's not a very strong critic of neoliberalism or capitalism. as the engine of growth and wealth and on sustainability. People gotten richer, we got more wealth. Capitalism is a good engine for progress. So, at least that's my interpretation. That he says, capitalism has its problems, but you got anything better? Well, the good news is there are better economic systems than capitalism, much better. And I encourage you to read about them. Sometimes people say, well, what's the alternative? Socialism? Communism? No, there are better systems. Go to Europe and read some of the books. I mean, I just finished reading a book by George Monbiot. It's called Out of the Wreckage. I recommend it, etc. Okay, so he's not that critical about neoliberalism and capitalism. I am. He's not so much the destruction of the environment, forest species extinctions, and the possible sixth extinction. He goes, sustainability, it's kind of we'll work through that. But I just share with you how Brazil is destroying the Amazon, and the leaders of Brazil allowing that. And yet that is part of the health of the planet. You destroy the Amazon, you're destroying our health, the future of our planet. Global warming, climate change, rising seas, those are all potential side consequences of what we're doing to the world. We also live in a culture of consumerism and alienation. That's a byproduct of the kind of society that we live in. And he has a chapter on happiness, which is, hey, we're getting happier. So alienation, what's that? That kind of thing. A modern concept of progress. I have a problem with that modern concept of progress in technological solutions. For example, nuclear energy and nanotechnology is going to solve everything. So let's continue. So what is the future of progress? And I'm almost done here. Then we'll take some questions and answers and things like that. The future of progress, according to Pinker, many intellectuals and social critics, especially from the left, refuse to acknowledge the progress that has been made and are also pessimistic. So he sees a lot of these people, like I mentioned already, as pessimists if you criticize a version of progress, a modern version of progress. Pinker acknowledges that leaders like Trump are a setback to the process of progress. So in this book, he does spend a few paragraphs by denying climate change and by pulling us out of the Paris climate agreement. So he does think it's problematic what we're dealing with today in America. So what's my version of progress? Evolutionary progress. So again, I want to build on the four ideals of the Enlightenment. I'm not against science, I'm not against reason, I'm not against humanism, I'm not against progress, but the key question here is, what kind of progress do we want for humanity and for the future? And what is his qualities, his characteristic, and what kind of world do we want that progress to lead us into? So here I draw inspiration from thinkers like Julian Huxley, Rian Eisler, who has done an excellent job of giving us a paradigm beyond the patriarchal paradigm, because he argues for a paradigm of partnership where men and women are on equal basis, not matriarchy, not patriarchy, partnership. It's a new paradigm. I'm really inspired by her work. And I think we men have a lot to learn from her. People like Jonas Salk, Tony Fry, who's an excellent evolutionary thinker from Australia. People like George Monbiot, I just mentioned him, from England. Cristóbal Buarque from Brazil, who I think I had the pleasure a couple of years ago to present his ideas for humanism. He's a Brazilian humanist, Cristóbal Buarque, and many others. So we are in good company, we humanists. We are in good company. We have people, brilliant thinkers all over the planet, and we can draw from them. Cristóbal, for example, has an amazing vision of a Brazil that is ecological, sustainable, just, democratic, but he's not going to get reelected. Sorry, with that agenda and the current mindset. But it doesn't mean that Brazil doesn't have brilliant thinkers. I believe that the four ideals of the Enlightenment are still relevant and useful, but need to be expanded and given an evolutionary vision and purpose. Don't forget, those ideals of reason and etc. were brought forward more in the last 300 years, 500 years, but we also need to evolve them to make sense for the future. So, evolutionary progress, here I present some ideas of what that could be. For example, yes, we need reason, but we also need emotional intelligence. So it's not either or. Reason has been good for us, right? For the last 500 years. Instead of superstition, we evolved to reason. Wonderful. Well, now we need to take one little step further and say, well, we have emotions. I mean, when I read this humanist thing here, we're guided by reason. Everything's very scientific. Well, it should be also say emotions. Emotions are part of the limbic brain. We humans are limbic animals, emotional animals, loving animals, but we're also crazy animals. As Pinker would say himself, we are crooked timber. I like that metaphor. We are crooked timber. And sometimes we humanists buy our own stuff, like, reason and science. Well, we're also emotional. And emotions can be influenced, shaped, manipulated, for good or bad. And I think our current administration knows how to do that. So we should not, so a future evolutionary progress, we need to educate ourselves and our children to be with emotional intelligence, not just with science and evidence. Second, we need to understand the workings and the mechanism of the right brain and the left brain. We know more today than we used to know 50 years ago. And today, we're dominated by right brain thinking. We're dominated. So the left brain doesn't have a lot of, support. So we need to balance that equation in the brain, and it's interesting research out there in neuroscience. From alienation to belonging. We live in a world of a lot of alienation. People have hard time building communities, hard time feeling part of communities. We live a very lonely lives a lot of times. So from alienation to belonging. Living in ecological, sustainable communities and cities. We need that, beyond just the Tesla car. I mean, you drive a Tesla, you go, oh man, I'm living in California, I'm driving an electric car, I'm sustainable. that's good, but not enough. Okay, we need renewable energy systems. We need science for sustainable civilization. In humanism that includes a new story, now here's a key one, humanism that includes a new story for making sense of life and living. We need that. That's a big evolutionary challenge. We need to replace the story, one could say, the story that has been handed down to us for the last 5,000 years of humanity, which we know is not science or evidence-based. We replace it with a new story. And here, Pinker, interesting, he says, almost towards the end, in the last page, 453, Pinker says, By the way, not only do we have what he calls recursive language, I mean, he does one of the best explanations of language, by the way. He says we have recursive language to have thoughts about thoughts. We have instinct for language, allowing us to share the fruits of our experience and ingenuity. We are deepened with the capacity for sympathy, for pity, imagination, compassion, and commiseration. Okay, and then he ends the book by says, we will never have a perfect world, and I agree with that. I mean, I believe in evolutionary progress, but I'm not going for utopia. So we're not talking about utopia. We're going to have conflict all the time. It's part of human nature. We're going to have some suffering, but we don't have to kill each other. You know, and if you ever live in a marriage or a partnership, you know, it's not easy. I know. So a little suffering is good. Okay, so he says we will never have a perfect world, and it will be dangerous to seek one. But there's no limit to the betterments we can attain if we continue to apply knowledge to enhance human flourishing. That's beautiful. So this is, then I'll read the last paragraph. And this is about the story. So it's related to this point here about the story. He says, and the story of humanity belongs not to any tribe, but to all humanity. To any sentient creature with the power of reason and the urge to persist in this way of being. For it requires only the convictions that life is better than death, health is better than sickness, abundance is better than want, freedom is better than coercion, happiness is better than suffering, and knowledge is better than superstition and ignorance. So those are some key elements that he offers for the construction of the new story. Now, I also say, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit on my version of the story, because I think it's up for grabs right now. We could all, so he gave us some guidelines, opinions. So I say, in terms of evolutionary progress, okay, we need a new economics beyond neoliberalism and beyond capitalism that is based on new values, sustainability, systemic understanding of our relationship with nature, and, for example, local circular economics. Okay? Circular economics is a more ecological type base of economics. So making education accessible and free for all for life. That should be like a bottom line. You know, I think Bernie Sanders was on the right track with that one. We need to do it. Give everyone equal education. There are countries who do that. Slovenia does it. Finland does it. Why can't the United States? I mean, I'm not going to tell you how much I pay for college education for my kids in this country. It's amazing what they charge, okay? It should be free. We also need a new culture. I'm almost done. A new culture, new values and desires that work in favor of human beings being more caring, loving, relational, and wiser. So we need to redesign the cultural and the cultural values we live with by today. And I think humanism has a lot to contribute there. And here, in terms of evolutionary progress, a global project, we definitely need this, to stop global warming, climate change, and prevent the possible displacement of millions of people. There was an article recently in the New York Times Magazine 2 weeks ago that talks about global warming. We could have prevented it in the 1980s, and we didn't. We missed the boat. So now we got to deal with it now. So I recommend it. It's in the New York Times Magazine about 2 weeks ago. And finally here, I propose the collaboration among nations to work on the implementation and transformation of the UNDP 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I work with the UN, and the UN has an excellent vision if we were to apply what we know to transforming the 17 sustainable development goals, we will have a much better planet, much better civilization than we have today. For example, I'll give you one of the goals of the 17 goals. Educating girls. Educating girls. Sounds easy, right? Not that easy. But if we were to educate girls on this planet to have plenty of education, it would impact climate change. It's interesting, the relationship between education of girls and climate change, and all the type of things, poverty, ignorance, planning, population, etc. Okay, so I just gave you one, okay, of the 17. The building of a just, sustainable, saner, flourishing world. And then finally, to finish with this one, evolutionary progress also means evolutionary humanism sharing among nations. Evolutionary humanism share among nations. We need to expand this knowledge that we have in this room, in these books, in this movement with other people. I was born in Colombia, in South America, and I don't think we have a humanist chapter in Colombia. I don't think so. I don't know why not. You know, so we need that. That's progress. Also, we need a new story, a narrative based on science, evolution, ecology, and humanistic values. And we need evolutionary progress and its goals implemented in the world. And finally, we need evolutionary leaders promoting a conscious evolution, not an unconscious evolution, which is what we have today. Today we are in the process of unconscious evolution. We're drifting towards a possible sixth extinction if we don't watch it. So we need a conscious evolution in worldviews, cultures, and institutions toward a just, saner, sustainable, and flourishing future. And those things we humans can change. We can change our worldviews. We have power over that. We can change our cultures. We've done it. We can change our institutions, and we definitely can produce a better world. And with that, thank you so much for all of you, and now questions and answers.
Arthur Jackson here. I've been spending most of my life trying to do what every person probably does, is how in the hell do we get to where we need to go? And I'd like to respond to your statement about utopia. Because I frankly think in terms that we could build utopias, but I want to define utopia in a way that they're achievable rather than the way they're usually used as something unachievable. And I think that's a mistake in our thinking when we think in that mode. So for me, a utopia is a place where we all do work together to help each other, use our resources wisely, and that kind of thing. And for me, that's really what a utopia is.
Yes, and that definition of achievable is the good one. Thank you, Arthur. That would be a good utopia. That's achievable rather than something that is so perfect and dreamy, etc. Thank you. Next.
Couple of points. First off, there's not a word mentioned about overpopulation. That is a real problem, and we keep breeding at a great rate. That's one point. The second... That's
in the 17 SDGs, by the way, population.
Yeah. The second point is that I'm not so much concerned about Bush or Trump. It's the supporters. Trump gets 63 million voters for it, and the same with Bush. Ridiculous. The third point is that, according to NPR the other day, only 13% of the countries on the planet are democracies. I am a born pessimist. I'm looking forward to extinction as the only solution. Thank you. God has spoken.
Okay. Thanks for your opinion. I agree with the population being a problem for humanity. Okay, go ahead, please. And then.
Well, answer that. How do you solve it?
Well, it's interesting, just quick, because I want to give everybody a chance. So, remember I mentioned how girl education is related to population? It's amazing. It's amazing when you look at the systemic relationship. You improve the quality of girl education, you make a big difference in many other systems. That's my answer. Let's move on. Thank you. Yeah, okay, we'll move on.
Thank you. What do you think about a political progressive movement? In particular, in California, we have the growing movement of progressive alliances. For instance, I'm a member of South Bay Progressive Alliance, and there are many more that share almost exactly the same vision as you suggested, the same goals of sustainability, of this new humanistic vision,
Right.
and looking beyond capitalism in a sort of democratic socialism kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And maybe you see some practical possibilities of collaboration between your institute and this progressive organization. So
Yeah.
what do you think about it?
Well, first of all, I think that there are many small political movements in the world that have better agendas than, I would say, even the Republicans or the Democrats in this country. There's one in Denmark that I'm familiar with. It's called The Alternative. Check it out. Go to their webpage, The Alternative. You can learn from them in Denmark. And my institute is willing to contribute. If you say, hey, Manuel, come and do an evolutionary leadership program for us, we'll do it. We'll help you out because we do need progressive political leaders who are evolutionary, who have an evolutionary agenda and evolutionary vision. So we need that to be able to be more effective in sharing the story of a just, sustainable, and flourishing world. If you can expand on that vision, which a lot of you tell a lot of people sustainability, they think is about recycling. That's a very small definition of sustainability. Because we're talking here about sustainable institutions, sustainable cities, sustainable energy. We're talking about redesigning the whole thing. And one of the things that George Monbiot, in his book Out of the Wreckage, which I recommend for politics, says we in this country, especially the Democratic Party, has played it too small, too safe. It was only Bernie who dared to say, we're going to have, for example, free education. Come on. So we need to have big, bold ideas and big, bold leaders. So let me stop with that. Well, I'm going to let whoever manages the mic do that. There's a gentleman in the back raising his hand.
Yes, thank you. So I was interested to see you talk about right brain and left brain thinking, because I remember when that was a very hot topic. Certainly Rand Eisler talked a lot about that, as well as many others from that time period. It's interesting, there's a recent autobiography of Michael Gazzaniga, who did a lifetime of research on right brain and left brain neuroscience. And he seems to think that the way we thought of right brain and left brain stuff is wrong. And so I was just thinking about that and saying, so why did we get so excited about what we got excited about? And I think I found out what the answer is. And I've put that on my most recent blog post on justthisworld.com. So I think you would be very interested to take one small step forward in understanding what we used to like about right brain and left brain stuff and what is it all about in my recent blog post.
Thank you very much. I will look into it. Okay?
There's been tremendous progress in terms of population. The women fertility rate is half of what it used to be. That includes even Muslim countries where you would think religion would get in the way. And it is because women are more valuable. And we brought down infant mortality so people don't feel like they have to have an heir and a spare. And, infectious disease, etc. And Pinker agrees with you that women's education is very important. And once you know that people are going to live longer and they don't have to have all these babies, then
Yeah, I agree.
it helps.
It creates a good cycle, creates a good systemic virtue cycle of more education, more longevity, more quality of life, etc. Yeah, I totally agree. And, we just need to do it. Okay, continue. We have room for this? Yeah, go ahead.
I look at the world in a slightly different way, but I'm reading the political page every day.
Yeah.
And we have this current president, and what I'm trying to get my mind around is capitalism and the dark side of capitalism, and the billions that some people have, and now half of our population is moving out of town because they can't afford the riches that Silicon Valley has produced. And so I really want to know another type of government besides capitalism that works, that inspires people, still inspires people to work hard and invent, but not the greed part.
Right.
I'd like to hear that. Thank you.
I definitely, no, I agree with you. I mean, I live in the Bay Area and I feel the pressure myself as individually. I can't even afford to buy property like I used to in Boston. So I mean, when I wake up and I look at my reality around me, the gentrification in Oakland, I go, gee, I'm going to have to sign up my life for 30 years and work and 50 hours a week just to pay this for a little tiny little place.
I wouldn't want to have to buy my own house again.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. So we got things really backwards. I recommend again George Monbiot, his book Out of the Wreckage, because he does an excellent job of proposing the new economic system, the new economic history. One of the things that I discovered just reading that book by Monbiot, Out of the Wreckage, he is interesting from a human perspective, as humanists. One of the things sometimes we have to recognize is that the human world was designed and created by whom?
Capitalists.
By whom?
Leaders.
Yeah, by humans, right? By humans. We humans created, designed the world we got today. It's that simple. And because we humans created and designed the world we got today, we can also redesign it and recreate it. Because it's we who are the designers. Then you could say the good and the guilty part. So one of the things that George Monbiot says in his book is, if you want to change a country, you need a new story. You change a society. You cannot change a society by taking away their story and not replacing it with a better story. No one in their right mind as human beings is going to give up their belief system unless you give them a better belief system. That's the way we humans are. So if you want to remove the story of capitalism, you got to come up with a story that's more sexier, flourishing, alive, happier than the capitalism that we have today. And if we don't provide that story, it doesn't matter, Bernie or whoever. So we need to do it. And that's the challenge. Now he's interested in Monbiot's book. Who are the two key thinkers who designed neoliberalism? Who? There are two people who wrote books, who wrote the ideals that are driving neoliberalism to where it is today. There are two people. Then who do you think they are? It's a test. I'll tell you who they are. Who do you think they are? If we don't know who those two people are, we have not done our homework. Sorry. No. We're talking about people like 50, 60, 70 years ago. You don't know?
No.
I mean, most people say capitalism was Adam Smith, right? Adam Smith, the invisible hand. It's true. Adam Adam Smith created, he kind of got the ball rolling. But what about you, young man? You're in high school. Do you know who the...
Are you talking about the Austrian School of Economics?
Yes.
But I don't remember their names.
Well, okay, but you're on the right track.
I knew very recently and I forgot.
Hayek.
Yeah.
Hayek. The Constitution of Liberty. Read his book, The Constitution of Liberty. Hayek. Human beings are born to be rich, accumulate wealth. Politics, freedom, democracy, that gets in the way. Sorry. And guess who bought this philosophy? Margaret Thatcher. Ronald Reagan. He wrote the book, The Constitution of Liberty. Hayek, and who's the other guy? No, Friedman is a student of the other guys. Yes, that's the other guy. Thank you. Say it. Well, Mises. Yeah, Mises. I mean, you go to Mexico City, there's a Mises Institute. Who do you think funds Cato Institute and all these right-wing think tanks? It's all based on the Constitution of Liberty by Mises and Hayek. And they say anything that gets in the way of capitalism is wrong and bad, including democracy. Including democracy. So we, where we live in today was written by two guys, Austrian school, and he had it. And Margaret Thatcher said, let's go for it. And Ronald Reagan said, let's go for it. And we're still saying, let's go for it. Anyway, so we need to be the architects, the people in this room, the humanist movement, we need to be the voice, the story, the architects of the new narrative that says, no, we don't want that kind of world. And take a shot at it, go home and have a cup of coffee and write the new Constitution of Liberty. Why not? Arthur writes. It's not that bad.
I'm working right on that.
All right, sir?
Go ahead, sir.
The American Humanist Association, of which we are a chapter, every year picks a Humanist of the Year.
Yeah.
And that's whose pictures are in the back.
Yes.
We don't get to pick who is there.
But we can tell them who to recommend next time. I recommended, for example, bell hooks 10 years ago. And you know what they told me? We cannot give bell hooks the prize for you because she believes in Buddhism. Come on, give me a break. Buddhism? I mean, there are many types of Buddhism. Well, bell hooks deserves to be a Humanist of the Year. You know. But anyway, so I mean, that answer, like, well, she believes in Buddhism, is like, well, give me a break.
Frederick Hayek and Ludwig von Mises, when they talked about being opposed to democracy, what they're opposed to is the tyranny of the majority. The United States is a republic where we vote for representatives who make reasoned and calm decisions for us. And a pure democracy can lead to tyranny. And so I just wanted to make that correction because von Mises and Hayek were, my father went to the Mount Pelerin Institute, which was started by Hayek. And so I know quite a bit about Hayek and von Mises. But,
it could be
so
that
you have to put this in context as to what they said about democracy.
And what the U.S. President or Thatcher did with it, right? Because they may have interpreted it a different way, correct, than what they said. Is that correct? Something like that, right?
No.
So that's what he said, and then that's what other people do with it, right? That's what I'm trying to point to.
It's about interpretation.
Yeah. Okay. Everything's about interpretation.
I really appreciate a lot of the points you made. I wish you had spent more time on your points, which were very positive towards the end rather than the beginning, but I understand where you're coming from in that. I appreciated your mentioning some women and the education of girls, but I think when you're talking about the story, the lecture, the discussion, all of this, we can change the story right here and right now and be more inclusive. And some of the things just really jumped out to me. For example, when we talk about reason, so important to talk about that emotional part that we just skip over, totally. If we talk about science, I didn't hear one mention of the word the arts. So if you're talking about a totality of a talk, a presentation, it seems a lot focused on the old story as opposed to the new story and what we can be and some of the other people and the contributions to it. And I think this is just like the seed is in there, but you don't feel it yet. You don't feel the story. You don't even, it needs a lot more work. So that's us, that's us.
We got
Okay.
homework.
Thank you.
We do it. Thank you. We do have homework.
All right, this concludes the Q&A session. Let's thank Manuel for his talk.
All right.